Hey, how are you guys?
Right. Hello. So we're at the 74th. Something. Let's see. So, hopefully we can kind of finish this today. What else did I mention? This. There's some intriguing options for next time, which we'll put here actually. Maybe we can decide that before we dive deeply into stuff. Basically this. We'll get to that later. But yeah, hey Morgan. So, any kind of updates since last week or last time we talked or whatnot?
I don't think so. I'm not going to be able to make it this Saturday.
Okay. Yeah, I couldn't make all the last week's meeting either, basically. But I'll be there. I should be there Saturday. This Saturday. But we're still on for tomorrow night for Cybernetics group.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to just finish this paper then. I doubt we'll get all the way through it. Maybe we start with the other things for this meeting then.
Yeah, and I don't plan on talking about a bunch of other stuff. I kind of want to get to the paper too. But to kind of, we'll clear out a few things of business too. My small update is it's been a really nice day for me in the sense that I've got good sleep, which is great. And I really needed it because I have had 3 pretty substantial meetings today. And this will be number 4. And all of them went really well. One of them was a JoPro related meeting that wasn't really intended to happen, but was kind of necessary and was really, really, really good for that. And I'll talk more about that Saturday, but I'm kind of fresh off of it. I'm really excited to keep fleshing things out with what that is. And I know I haven't really mentioned a lot of things directly about it, but I think I'm ready to kind of frame some things out or frame what's going on there in some useful ways. So stay tuned Saturday for that. Yeah, that's all. I don't want to get too much deeply into anything right now. Some things that just popped up today, basically. Interesting. Maybe we'll talk about this Saturday or some other time. I know Melanie Mitchell, or I put Margaret here. Whoops. I'm pretty sure that's Melanie. Yeah. All right. Yeah. I guess I was trying to tag Donna Mitchell. But anyway, interesting. Someone was like, "Oh, this is a really good like history and future," but it was like a good chunk of it, a quarter, a third of it, maybe was maybe even half of it was like history. I didn't get through all of it yet, but looks like an interesting resource, obviously from Melanie's perspective on it, but it might be interesting to bring that into later. I've been thinking of one of the things about the JoPro meeting is like I'm thinking quite a bit about kind of opening up to interns again a little more on purpose, and where would they go and what would they do, and there's a few thoughts about AI related stuff that'd be really, really fun to do. Well, let's talk about that more Saturday or whenever it's available. But this is sort of a reminder of that and nudging that. And yeah, that was interesting. And then a fun little thing happened just before this meeting. I saw this post about what would you add, and it's something to do with like, how do living things differ from non-living things and whatnot. And I was like, oh, we just read this really cool paper, right? And got a brief acknowledgement from Josh Bungard on that. So that was pretty fun to see that and to kind of get people talking about that paper. That paper is really one that's been on my mind quite a bit since we've read it. And I posted in the Slack about like, yeah, like, one of the things I want to get an intern in project design more towards specifically is that. And fits with a lot of the other taxonomy stuff that we've been doing and naming, but ahead on that would be I'm looking forward to what's ahead on that. Some things for next time. We kind of this Lisa Feldman-Barrett lab paper. I actually found it by following one of the guys in her lab, but it looks pretty cool. It's just like this sort of. There was even a better summary about like homeostatic and allostatic something or other. Oh yeah. Let me say it. But it's in the Slack channel. But it's sort of this different kinds of trying to use devices and feedback from them in a unique circular motion interface that enables intuitive virtual interactions. So that might be exciting. And there's also one about Fuchs, which let me easily pull that up. This was sort of, I guess, you can't really see much of it. Well, kind of, I guess. A review of Thomas Fuchs' in Defense of Human Being. I don't know if that's a book that he wrote. Yeah. So it's sort of a review, but the person who wrote it, it like said, oh, it turned into this like several year collaboration or something like that, talking about it. What started as a simple book review turned into a years long engagement on the relation between human beings and artificial ones. So that might be an interesting thing to look at ahead too. But we can sort that out later. I want to mention a lot of cool things here. Any particular leans between these two for like what to do after this one?
What is the first one? I mean, is there this one?
It's
the Lisa Feldman-Barrett
from Lisa Feldman-Barrett's lab.
Yeah, I think we should do that one. The Alice interoception as allostasis or whatever it is. I think that would be good.
Yeah, I'm trying to find where that came from because that was like a really cool way to phrase it. And I don't know if that was like a tweet or something or I put it somewhere, but yeah.
Yeah.
But this is the paper. So yeah, we can maybe lean towards this one.
Is the interoception, that's a different paper, right?
Yeah, it's a different paper.
Okay. Yeah, the interoception one looked really cool to me. I haven't looked much at this one. And then Fuchs, we could pass on that. I feel like I can kind of imagine what Fuchs have to say about AI.
I put the wrong link down, sorry. Yeah, this is the one.
Yeah, this looks cool.
Sorry. Jeez, I totally got the wrong link altogether there. Sorry about that. But yeah, that's the one. That was the one I was really intending to do. Yeah. Yeah, the brain regulates the body. Yeah. Okay, let's do that next time. Cool. So, good. Yeah. So we'll continue with biology of cognition. I know we're kind of past this point, but I feel like description is there's a lot of talk about describing it. So I think I kind of want to just backtrack to this. And this is still, I believe this is still in part 4 of the cognitive functions in particular. And it's going through all these particulars, I guess. And, description was this one section, and it was about, about things being predictive. He talks about big D description. Says the niche of an organism is a set of all classes of interactions into which it can enter. The observer beholds the organism in its environment it defines. For him, any of the organism's behaviors appears as an articulation of its actualization of its niche, that is, the first order description of the environment, henceforth denoted by capital D description. This is a description in terms of behavior interactions of the observed organism, not of representations of environmental states. And the relation between behavior and the niche lies exclusively in the cognitive domain of the observer. So I guess what we want to keep in mind is that description is an inherent commentary on the observer. And in that framing, according to Maturana's
description is a what?
Hmm?
Description is a what? What is the so of what is description in relation to the observer?
It is specifically in the domain. Let me say it. Is the description is this description, capital D description, is the description in terms of behavior interactions of the observed organism, not representations of the environmental states. I guess I would say within the organism. And the relationship between the behavior, the observed behavior, and the niche lies exclusively in the cognitive domain of the observer. So I guess I'm interpreting that as in Maturana's work here, he's making a very clear, when he's talking about capital D description, he means as described by the observer, in his sense, the observer's sense of this niche behavior interaction set of relations of the observed organism. But I mean, we're moved far past that and where we were. I think we were starting in the natural languages.
Yeah, I think we had gotten to how language is orienting.
Yeah, language is orienting, and then a bit about denotation and I think connotation somewhere also. But yeah, so around here. Before totally diving in, do we have any comments or questions that came up between last time, or that you're just wondering now, I guess? Okay. So venturing forth, yes, natural language as orienting, linguistic behavior as orienting behavior. This mentioned much ahead. Descriptions, yeah. I think one of the things I'm most confused about is kind of going into this next section or two. They're kind of, there's sort of a bit about like communicating descriptions to orient each other. Like I'm not quite grasping it fully yet. But like, however, only the domains of interaction of the two organisms, only if those domains of the two organisms are to some extent comparable, such as consensual orienting interactions possible, are such consensual interactions possible, and the two organisms able to develop some conventional but specific system of communicative descriptions to orient each other and to cooperate each other to cooperative classes of interactions that are relevant to both.
Right. So I read that as meaning that when language is used to communicate, it's not like person A expresses content that is then received by person B. It's that what's said by person A, the goal is to get person B to get their mental life moving in the right direction, and that's what this orientation is supposed to be. So it's not like the transmission of information from one to another. It's a kind of pointing. It's trying to direct person B's attention to the right things in the right order.
Yeah, even like words like getting in sync or like a resonant, like trying to initiate resonance, maybe in Fuchsian sense of like mutually, okay, we're both vibrating at the same thing. Yeah, that's, I appreciate that being said now. Yeah, and then we get into this denotative stuff, and I think that fits. I think that fits what Min is saying about like it's not just a denotative objective. Here is the message. Here is a thing. It's more. Conversely, if it's recognized that language is connotative, and that the function is to orient the orientee with this cognitive domain, which is basically what we just talked about. Whoops. Yeah, he's saying this is sort of a what it's about. Cooperative consensual language, cooperative consensual interaction between organisms that is natural language. I guess natural. I guess that's what natural language is to him. So natural language, as in the means of communication that is orienting in attempting to foster towards some consensually mutually descriptive interaction. In accordance with this, I maintain that learned orienting interactions, coupled with some motor behavior that's allowed for an independent recursive expansion of the domain of inertial reasoning, such as social life, and or tool making and use, must have offered selective bias for the evolution of orienting behavior that in hominids led to our present-day languages. I think it's an interesting point. I would really love to like phone a friend, Dr. Julie. I can't remember her last name. She was the person I was talked about a lot at UCSD, and I think she's in Stanford now. She specifically focuses on like tool use and drawing or like manipulating tools, and I wonder if she's like how she goes with that. Yeah, okay. 3, behavior function depends on, I want to say, it'd be interesting to compare this to, like Fuchs saw like affectivity into emotions as orienting also, right? Like his point was like emotions essentially became like directive. And I always find sort of like the vector, like the where directional things interesting. But that's sort of a note for later. 3, behavior function depends on organizational structure. A lot of talk about structure here. Evolution of language, natural selection by acting upon oriented behavior as a function that is enhanced strongly increases the cooperation between social animals. So it's really focusing on language orienting and cooperation. It is very like mutual, very consensual themes here. Diversity of interactions to which man can be oriented has increased through the concomitant expansion of the internal projections of the brain onto itself. That means it new connections. Cortical layers. More on denotative language. And yeah, kind of like receiver sender, like we had talked about, like you mentioned. And goes back to one connotative. It means this. So this is sort of an expansion upon all that. Right? And you get cooperation. I guess, is this, oh no, there's still more in this section. Okay. We're not quite at, we're still on natural language. Yeah, here. And again, there's the interlocutors thing. And behooves the interlocutor to choose where to orient his cognitive domain as a result of linguistic interaction. Again, descriptions. Did we talk about flying planes before? I forget. I don't think so. 6, if one considers the interaction as orienting, it's apparent that it's not possible to separate function. It's not possible to separate functionally semantics and syntax. However separable they may seem in the description by the observer. This is true for 2 reasons. Talks about sequence, and then when the observer speaks any explanation of the word are that he may give lies in the descriptive domain. Okay. And the second reason is entire series of communicative descriptions can be itself a communicative description. The limit is in the capacity of the nervous system to discriminate. Okay. Here is a Chomsky reference. Linguistic behavior is a historical process of continuous orientation. Mentions any correlation between different domains of interactions lies exclusively in the cognitive domain of the observer. Yeah, well, yeah. Description. The coordinated states of neural activity, which specify conduct in the series of effector receptor states whose significance arrives in the conceptual domain, does not differ as neurophysiological generation from other coordinated states of neural activity. It goes back to maintenance. And then finally for this part on natural language, the orienting process. Orienting behavior. Oh yeah, I'll share this. I forgot to put this in the one right here. Orienting behavior in an organism with a nervous system is capable of interacting recursively with its own states expands the cognitive domain by enabling it to interact recursively with descriptions of its interactions. Take a natural language. It's generative, new sequences of orienting, consensual domain. Okay. So up next is memory and learning, and then we get to the observer, and that will actually close out this cognitive functions in particular section. So spend a lot of time there. For memory and learning, we have learning as a process. Learning as a process consists in transformation through experience of the behavior of the organism in a manner that is directly or indirectly subservient to the maintenance of its basic circularity. I feel like I don't think he had a section about maintenance, but it's definitely like a central theme for him. It's sort of, I take it as like somewhat adjacent to like or a component of like homeostasis or allostasis. I don't know if he really, I forget if he spells that out somewhere, but yeah.
Going into this section, I was interested, so I guess going back, weeks to when we kind of started the Cybernetics reading group with the topic of memory. I've been interested in how, like, what a theory of memory can look like that is like truly, 4E, because it seems like the conventional theory is something like, it's very like substance based. It's very much like the memory is, it used to be that it's like a part of the brain. Maybe now it's like a particular pattern of activation. But it still kind of fits into this filing cabinet metaphor, that you store memories. Like even the more me versions, I feel like they frame the question as how is memory stored, and it seems like that metaphor that has to be fundamentally flawed. So I was interested in how this paper would offer a version of that, a theory of memory that isn't, a filing cabinet. And he makes a comment at the end of 6, memory as storage of representations of the environment to be used on different occasions and recall does not exist as a neurophysiological function. So there's that point, but I was kind of, it's still unclear to me what the positive, the theory is supposed to be. I kind of felt like a little lost in this. Like, what is memory and learning supposed to be? It is kind of, it's a rewiring, but I don't know. Just because that's a question I'd been thinking about for a while, and I feel like this was an interesting start to an answer. It's really hard to think about memory without thinking of storage, though, and I don't know if that comes from like the phenomenology of memory or the way we think about time passing. I don't know why that metaphor is so hard to avoid.
Yeah, and you can kind of see like that the metaphor that does fit so well with like mind's computer. Like you have this hard disk, this hard storage somewhere.
Well, even before the computer metaphor, it's like, oh, the mind is like a book. Like that's the physical transcribing of information that can be returned to. So there's I feel like maybe part of why that metaphor is so ingrained is it's like it's not as new as a computer. It's like as new as written language.
Right, and I would say that like in my foray and uncompleted journey into that whole paper about analogies of the mind, I think it fits really well with what I saw there, because it's sort of like a lot of that space is a lot of that space is like it almost feels like how do you say it in a weird way it actually, I don't really want to dip too much into what was just said about what was the bit about tools. But what I was going to say, kind of regardless of this point about tool making use, is that it's almost like there's sort of a recursive, not recursive, but like anthropomorphization of like humans do memory by offloading into almost like this weird relation to like not necessarily tools, not necessarily cognitive offloading, but sort of like memory is something you to remember something, you do this thing, and you like put something down and you pick it up later. Like that act of how we most consciously perceive of generating or retrieving a memory is what memory is. And I think that's part of why the analogy is what it is. I think it's part of why the history goes that way, because it's sort of like, oh well, I do this, so that has to be. I make this thing, I generate this thing, and then it comes,
it orients you.
Like, yeah, well, yeah, or like you interact with it in a very specific way, and I think it's quite interesting because if I recall, what was the paper that there's a big paper, was it about physical memory? Was it 11 paper about physical memory? Like my feeling at the end of that discussion, I remember very vividly, was I was like, oh geez, like after reading all this video about stuff, it's super clear to well, not super clear is the right word, but my feelings about it was that, oh, memory is not just that thing. It's actually more, and man, it just sort of insert the word orienting. But yes, and I didn't use the word orienting then, but more like it's much more about getting all these things in sync together. Like I'm a little bit, I guess, referencing like a lot all the work in like implanting false memory and how you can get enough like circumstantial evidence, you will fill in the blanks almost generatively. Like you can screw with minds that way to make these very vivid memories that didn't happen. Not to be like just psyops about it, but like there's an element of that too. But also like in a less nefarious way, like it's not just one thing. It's like this sort of getting everything. For me, it was very viscerally about like moving through space, or maybe moving through space time if you want, but like moving through it together, moving different parts together. And like how memory was much more, seeing memory was much more a like interactively dynamic, interactively coordinated effort. Was sort of my feeling at the end of that paper. So it's kind of weird to think about that here, and I'm not really sure how it squares with what Maturana says, but our discussion is interesting that way. Did you want to say anything more about this, or is that kind of? I don't know if we want to dive more deeply into the learning part or not.
I don't think I have any reactions to any particular parts of this.
it gets into some details about like modifying and stuff here, so I wasn't like. He does mention like historical transformations, take on like histories, like okay. What was the one I mentioned here? All changes in the nervous system. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
All changes in the nervous system during learning must occur without inference. It's continued functioning of a self-regulating system. And then, yeah, this is the point that you mentioned before. It's not memory. Memory as an illusion to representation in the learning organism of its past experience is also a description by the observer. So again, more description, more observer. And it's not the storage. Yeah.
I liked at the end that also realm of description and the cognitive domain is past, present, and future, and time in general. I thought that was very interesting. I think above that somewhere he says something about how the organism always is existing in the present.
Yeah, he says, I think it's even like a few pages going. Like it's specifically about the organism's always in the present, but these other things are like relevant to that cognitive domain, descriptive domain.
So I guess adding to my thoughts about how to I don't know, get rid of the filing cabinet metaphor. If the organism is always in the present, then what is going on when we seem to be recollecting the past? Like, what's the description of that that's fully in the present?
Can you say that again? That was really good. I kind of watched. If the organism is always in the present.
In the way Maturana is talking about, and what's happening when we seem to be recollecting the past. Like, yeah, we know it's not literal time travel, but why does it feel like we're not always in the present? I don't know. Maybe this kind of thought applies to imagination or like predicting the future or something.
I don't know if he says it. I'm tainted by something else I randomly saw. It was a little like, it's cringeworthy in the sense that it was a little bit like, it felt kind of law of attraction-y, but there was a neuroscience component, like the guy was a neuroscientist talking specifically about something. And it wasn't like mirror neuron stuff, but it was more like, I could see, I want to take the best of what he was getting at and try to answer Amanda's question. I could see, I don't know if Maturana says this, like something about reforming, something about, I don't like words like simulating, but recreating the act of experiencing it. But I wonder, like, what does it go into? Okay, you're switching, like almost like the anti-approche thing. Like you're switching out the present moment for like a past state that you're trying to reference and recreate, like something along those lines. Those words.
Yeah, interesting.
But here we are with the observer. Let's just lay it out. The cognitive domain is the entire domain of interactions of the organism, which feels like what is that an EG, like every good regulator for? The cognitive domain, it feels weird, I don't know. The cognitive domain can be enlarged if the modes of interaction are generated. Instruments enlarge our cognitive domain. Interesting. I'm actually going to. Yeah, okay. If the possibility of enlargement in the cognitive domain is unlimited, it is a historical process. Okay, the process is unlimited, enlarging it. It is a historical process. Our brain, the brain of the observer, has specialized during evolution as an instrument for the discrimination of relations, both internally and externally generated relations. The relations given through the interactions and embodied in the state of relative activity of the neurons. Yeah, I think I was trying to reference a fancy way of that too, what I said before, or his more expanded previous thoughts on what the neurons are doing. Furthermore, this furthermore, this occurs under circumstances where the discriminations between states of relative activity that for an observer represent the interaction of the organism, the nervous system that operate in a closed network. These states of relative activity constitute only changes of the relations of the activity that arise between its components, while it generates the internal and sensory motor correlations that the states of the organism select. This has two aspects. One refers to functional organization of nerve cells. The other refers to the ability of the nervous system as a neuronal organization to discriminate between its own states. As a result, new relations are necessarily created in each interaction. The observer generates spoken description of his cognitive domain. Whatever description he makes is the description which corresponds to a set of permitted states. Okay. Observer can describe a system. This logic demands a substratum for the occurrence of the discourse. We cannot talk about the substratum in absolute terms, however, because we have to describe it, and description is a set of interactions into which the describer and the listener can enter. And the discourse about these interactions will be another set of descriptive interactions. Thus, although the substratum is required for epistemological reasons, nothing can be said about it other than what it's meant in the ontological statement above. I wonder if we have any takes on that.
That was interesting. I don't know. It seems right, but then I think it's still the case that I don't know. That was, I guess, hard to make sense of, because it's, in a sense, it's a limitation of what description can do, but it also is kind of impossible to think about what this substratum is. Like, what is it that's outside of description? That doesn't really, we by definition cannot know. So I guess that seems like a concept that has come up a lot in the history of philosophy. What's behind what's outside of the cave, what's beyond the veil, what's unknowable.
I had this conversation with someone else earlier today. I mentioned a little bit. I mentioned basically the scaling at play in Maturana's work here. I mentioned how there were a lot of things that just didn't exist at his time. When he's writing in the 70s, there wasn't all this detailed description about network theory or neuroscience and what we now call cognitive science stuff and so on, and how that there's sort of one of the points I think Amanda specifically mentioned a while previously is it's sort of like is that lack of fine-grained stuff a major factor in him staying at this level? And like, is that something he would rather not do, or is that something that's very intentional too? Like it's a little bit, it's curious about what that is. But it reminds me of this too, like in the sense that it's interesting because I find a lot of his arguments interesting and relevant, but he also sort of demarcates where they end very clearly in a way that's like, okay, philosophically interesting and like like that's a nice way to have an argument, but also like, what is like like what does that all entail in this? I think that's a curious, as this is super relevant to me in terms of like when I'm talking about I think updating the language models artifacts to an extent. There's at least the language and models part. Like I think a lot of the work is sort of finding out at the levels of what language can be made at what level and where. Like, is there any way we can sort of functionally understand the bridging higher level, potentially updated language, and then the lower things of it? Where does it end and why? So that's a really, I don't really know if I'm going to venture deeply into that, but this is an area I would really like to investigate more potentially. So we're kind of coming to the end of this bit about all the processes, and he ends this part with saying, we as observers live in a domain of discourse interaction with descriptions, over description in a person manner. As a living system, however, we are closed systems modulated by interactions through which we define independent entities whose only reality lies in the interactions that specify them in the description. It'd be really interesting to think about this also a little bit in terms of sort of like the Long Forest or demons kind of things. Like closed, not like cognitively domain accessible things. I think the demons are a little more about like organizing what's inside. They're sort of like the way it's kind of these basic internal and external differences and what can happen with them. And sort of what are these bridging, like, almost extensions of those states or the domain gates. And then again, epistemological reason. He concludes by saying, invariants with such entities are generated through interactions to define them. Entities with different classes of properties generate independent domains of interactions. No reduction is possible. So, making that a strong statement there. So we get to the problems part. And I think that's close to the edge.
It is, yeah. I think it's enough to finish tomorrow.
Okay. Let's see. The problems. So, observer can always remain in the domain of interactions by encompassing his own interactions. He has a nervous system capable of no states. This is possible because of this mode of organization. Descriptions, interactive descriptions. Okay, I think, there's a big part A and part B with 3 parts. So what is saying this would be, it talks about self-consciousness. It is, he says, self-consciousness is not a neurophysiological phenomenon, it's a consensual phenomenon, emerging as an independent domain of interactions from self-orienting behavior and lies entirely in the linguistic domain. There are twofold implications, a lot of words around them. The linguistic domain is the domain of orienting behavior that requires at least two interacting organisms. So the cooperative systems may be developed in emerging contexts. Okay.
This was interesting. This whole bit about self-consciousness was interesting in the context of philosophers of mind trying to tease apart the different senses of consciousness. And reflective consciousness is one form, and it seems like that's what he's describing here. We're not talking about like pure phenomenal consciousness, like raw experience or whatever, however you want to cash that out. You're talking about something that is maybe unnecessary for life. The organism doesn't have to be oriented toward itself in order to be good at being an organism and survive. And I think that's what the situation most animals are in. But also it's the kind of thing that it's like, it allows for there to be a spectrum, to be degrees of self-consciousness. There are different ways that you can be oriented to yourself. So I just thought that was interesting. This kind of like taxonomy of consciousness, how that fits in with that in philosophy of mind more generally.
Yeah, I feel that,
and also how it relates to language, because I think that's really interesting connection. It seems like maybe I'm misunderstanding exactly what he's saying, but self-consciousness is linguistic because of the way that it's orienting.
I think it's a really interesting. It'd be really fun to tease that apart. Basically, looking at comparative cognition too, or like I would love to talk to like the comparative cognition lab at UCSD. I forget what it's called. It might just be called that. The one that does the famous, well, they're not doing it, but the one that's like, what's Bunny, or the dog that I mentioned from time to time, that has like the buttons, you press the buttons and it talks to you. Because I feel like the self-consciousness part particularly looks like, it really reminded me of this conversation that I had with someone who was a big fan of I'm kind of surprised there's a book about it now. Anyway, the book about the dog and the bunny, but we were talking at the time. I was like, I remember distinctly having a conversation with someone saying, "Oh, I was talking to the owner of the dog, and then the partner, and the partner of the person was saying like, oh, hey, like if this dog could talk, I don't think it'd say much at all, because it's like almost like implying it wouldn't have much to say, or almost wasn't very smart." And I was like, well, actually, I think that's true, but I think it's true for a different reason than you're implying. Because I think this dog, their dog was extremely self-conscious and extremely aware of, like, the dog, to me, very clearly picked up on a bunch of social cues. And I would agree that they would not say very much, but it was because the dog was super aware of what they were orienting towards, and constantly orienting towards these things. And I think it'd be really fascinating to know what the dog, like it's sort of like telling if a person is, oh, they just don't talk a lot, or like they're antisocial, or is it, no, like they're just being really guarded, really scrutinizing what to say and what is safe for them to say and how much they want to say. And that kind of difference between, like, almost like orienting as being self-conscious, but like more manipulation or more intentional, uh, you could say masking, I suppose, but more like strategy being at play, whereas less orienting, less perhaps self-conscious, less being more artless in another way, and or like just more visceral and less of that sort of mental gymnastics going on as well. I think that'd be a really fascinating way to look at this and talk to like the people doing those studies about that and doing those things. And another like pet example that I mentioned, just if I ever look at this again, like of course my favorite example of the stray cat that was sort of taken in and slowly acclimated its whole sense of like its reactions, because when it first came into the home and the person that had it, it had to not be self-conscious in this way. It had to react because in what its life was up until that point, largely, it had to respond to all the stimuli without this stuff going on. But as it became activated, because its owner was extremely intuitive and empathic and able to communicate, like they would like have their own language of actual verbal language, but also they make the noises, but they'd also do like much nonverbal communication as well. And like definitely they were both orienting, and it's like comfort in orienting. And as that happened, the cat, it very clearly changed. Like it could change. It could have different states of interaction much more freely, and just seeing that happen really clearly over time was like really fascinating in these terms as well. So not just what would in a specific state be orienting, I think developmentally, and like letting a creature into a different domain and maybe having differences along those lines would be also really interesting. Yeah, so we're still in this problem. This part is making this big thing about self-consciousness. The second part is part B. The twofold implications of part B was in Melissa's domain, it's not nerve as a phenomenon. It's impossible to account for in terms of the stuff of neurophysiology. Yeah, okay. At any moment, each nerve cell corresponds to a deterministic manner. Okay. I think we can. Okay, there's a lot more subpoints here. The nervous system is a system that functions in maintaining constant certain states. Okay, we're getting a little bit back to. I'm gonna. There's so much to make this here. Kind of getting a little back to the surprise talk. With reference only to some of its other states in relative activity. In this context, there's a bunch of points. A system that involves a specialized in discrimination between states of activity, innate and learned behaviors. Oops. The basic connectivity of the system. secures patterns of flow. So again, historical transformation of behavior, any modification of the transfer function nerve cell. This is why the immediate relevance of a conduct for maintenance of the organism in present, which any moment selects during my not the possible value of for future action. I don't quite get. I forget what his specific take on learning was, but I think he's saying learning is like ad hoc. I'm not sure about that. It's apparent the nervous system cannot determine in advance the concomitants of activity under which it should change its permanent manner. It's a very interesting line to me, for other reasons than is present here. For it to satisfy the needs of the organism, it must. There's this semicolon. For it to satisfy the future needs of the organism, it must operate under non-predictive changes continuously, selected by the concomitants of activity arising in it. Determine the effective spatio-temporal configurations of activity impinging on the collector areas of its component neurons. In these circumstances, the actual problem for successful operation of the nervous system is the generation at any moment of the optimal configuration of activity necessary to synthesize a given behavior. Okay. Nervous system is inferential system, that is, since it functions as if any state that occurred once will occur again. The significant feature of its organization must be its necessary and continuous transformation as a function of the new concomitants actively occurring in it. This function could be satisfied by new local concomitants that can occur probably spike region. Absence of interaction caused for local occurrence. If this were the case, four things would occur. And then we go find out what those four things are. Oh, click it. I'm missing it. Oh. One, the state of the nervous system would change and hence also conduct in its conduct according to the new concomitants that actively reproduce in the nerve. Each state of the system, each state of activity in the system will be defined by influences.
I liked the top of point 4. I felt like that is the beginning of maybe an account of memory too, that would be in line with some of the stuff we were talking about earlier. Learning is not a process of accumulation of representations of the environment. So it's not like similarly, maybe you can say like memory is not a process of accumulation of memories of like something. It is a continuous process of transformation of behavior through continuous change in the capacity of the nervous system to synthesize it. So I'm wondering how, because obviously memory and learning are tightly connected. So how much of this could also be an explanation of memory? Something like episodic memory. Something like, I don't know, the type of memory that is most like the filing cabinet metaphor, where it seems like we're collecting past experiences. So if that's not what's happening, if collection isn't the right word for it, then how is memory this type of continuous process? Or is that just like completely off the mark? Does that just not apply to memory at all? and the type of learning in question here maybe is different enough. I don't know.
This is a little bit of a out there comment, maybe most of them, but like when you think about like the super memory people who have like really, really strong, deeply ingrained memories, it's I think there's usually some like I don't know how to say this in the right way. I want to think about like emotional impact or emotional link to it. Like there's and I don't this it's too much to it's very general. But I'd be curious how I'm very curious about essentially what you're getting at too, in the sense of what if it is a matter of it not being a file storage thing. It's almost like, is there then essentially like a source of gravity by which around things are orbiting and in movement in relation to the gravity of that thing, and then that maintains it in existence? Or like is that like is what how much static or solid state does there need to be, if any? Maybe one way to get at it. And maybe that's potentially related to these. It'd be nice to kind of collect these statements, because occasionally, well, throughout the paper, Maturana made these statements like, the nervous system is strictly deterministic system. Like this is like description for his model. Description is this thing that an observer organism does to another organism.
Right. I started to, for the first section, I started to try to plot out some of these points, like draw little diagrams of when he was saying, oh, and this is a part of this, and this interacts with this. And I felt like what I was able to do successfully was what I already understood well. So it wasn't the most helpful, but I didn't get this far. So I agree that could be useful. It would at least be useful to, find these identity claims, and maybe just sort them a little differently or something.
Yeah. Furthermore, although any conduct or functional state always arises through the process of historical transformation from pre-existing modes of conduct or functional states, I guess I would say like, is a pre-existing mode of conduct or a state, if that's not necessarily a memory, but what is that? Like, is that like I could see him saying there's something about this state thing and like memory as attached to it, or like an interfacing mechanism somehow with it. But like I don't really know, and this is something that I've wondered for a lot of the sort of, not just Maturana, but other people that sort of talk like this, like what is this collection of things? I don't really know. Like, is it like a really bad analogy, but like, oh, it's like you have a bunch of records to play on your record player. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to play this record now. I'm going to play this record now. But it's like, do the records exist? Like, are they maybe even a better analogy would be like, it's almost like knowing the dance to the song. Like, okay, this is the dance I'm doing, and like this is the foxtrot or whatever, the tango. And it's like this is the environmental cues, and this, like, the song is the environment, and I'm going to dance in this way, and that's the state. And it's something like that. I don't really know. previously multifunctional states. The nervous system functions in the present again. And past histories do not participate as an operant neurophysiological factor in synthesis of conduct, nor does nor does the meaning the relevance of the particular mode of conduct has participate either. Time and meaning are effective factors in the linguistic domain, but as relational entities do not have neurophysiological correlates. Each one to its own accord. I always think of like biblical language, like according to its abilities. Thus, there's no particular neurophysiological process that can be shown to be responsible for the unity and explain it. Okay. It appears incomplete. Okay. Furthermore, in the strict sense, although the system has anatomical components, it does not have functional parts, since any mutilation leaves a functioning unit with different properties as expressed by its possible actions, but a unit corresponding to the domain. It appears incomplete only for the observer who beholds as it is. It beholds it as an entity from the perspective of what he thinks it should be. Each component of the nervous system that the observer describes is defined in the domain of interactions by his observations and as such alien to the system in which it's supposed to integrate. Okay. Every function has a structure which it embodies and makes it possible, but this structure is defined by the function and domain, its operation as a center relation between elements defining the domain. Neurons, structural elements.
I liked that bit. The structural elements of the functioning nervous system have not yet been defined, and it will probably be apparent when they are defined that they must be expressed in terms of invariance of relative activities between neurons, in some manner embodied in invariance of relations of interconnections, and not in terms of separate anatomical entities. I feel like, neuroscience has gotten to the point that we don't think in terms of separate anatomical entities. We don't think that's we don't think memory is like literally a part of the brain, and the memories are, particular neurons or something. But yeah, to some extent, I think that metaphor is still underlying our thoughts about the brain. But I guess this also gets to a point that we talked about when we were talking about cardiophenomenology and we can't feel our neurons, and we pushed back there can still be a meaningful description of a phenomenological experience that's based in the brain. You can still appeal to brain dynamics to describe particular experiences in theory. It's not going to be individual neurons. It'll be something more complicated. And here I think he's pointing to the way in which it would be more complicated. It would be something to do with these invariance of relative activities. And I guess I'm wondering, I don't know, to some extent I feel like neuroimaging is investigating those things. It's obviously very difficult, and there's a lot of assumptions that need to go into it, but I thought that was one part that I thought was, maybe it wouldn't have been super interesting if it were written now, but for 1970, pretty interesting. Still, vague, but I think appropriately so, because we can't now be more specific yet.
Well, I mean, it almost seems like sleight of hand in a bit, because he's like, well, there are these mechanisms that maybe prove my point, maybe disprove my point, but that's irrelevant because, we don't really know. And it's just the observer who's making this assumption. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of, like, you could say, for example, define a certain area of the brain and, do a lesion study and show that there's some sort of dissociable function. You could also observe some sort of adaptation where the brain co-opts some other pathway to, get around the loss of that function. And those are two separate things. And of course, as an observer, you don't know the true mechanism, at least unless you really, really study the thing well and know for sure what's going on. So I think it's very vague language, but almost, it doesn't really need to be like a kind of sleight of hand, but the way he writes it, it almost seems like that's what he's trying to do. I just wish like some of this stuff were less verbose, because it's like I mentioned last week, I think, some of this is like just because we didn't have the neuroscience knowledge at the time, or it's maybe not grounded in specific neuroscience examples. But some of it seems like it's like maybe fundamentally different from what we're doing here, or where neuroscience maybe can go or is going. So if you're talking about a network, it's a fundamentally different thing than the kind of network that a neuroscientist would study.
Okay, let's say something, Amanda.
No, just I think the network point is good.
Yeah, it's really tough. I kind of want to like to see like Maturana's later stuff and see what do you think now, But yeah. Okay, I think I don't know if we'll finish it right now, but we're at the conclusions part at last. Damn, the aim set for the introduction has been accomplished. Not even asked about that. There's no uncertainty about that. There you go. I've done it. Through the description of the self-referencing circular organization in the system and also domains, I have shown that the emergence of a self-referencing system capable of making descriptions and of generating is both consensual domains that is, I have shown the emergence of the observer. This result alone satisfies the fundamental demand put forth at the outset. The observer is a living system. Okay. A living system, and any understanding of cognition as a biological phenomenon must account for the observer and its role in it. Okay. And proves the validity of this analysis, according to some. Although the answers to the various questions posed in the introduction of this fundamental and in the fundamental implications of the analysis are to be found in the text itself, to the extent that the theory adequately founds its whole development, there are several conclusions I would like to explicitly state. Living organism is a circular organization which produces the maintenance of components that specify its functioning in a manner of productive. That the product of their functioning is the very same organization that produces them. Okay. So the sort of self-maintenance. Living systems are a subclass of the class of circular and homeostatic homeostatic systems. Homeostatic system. Okay. He talks about the observer and its claims, descriptions.
I haven't read this part yet. I stopped because I didn't think we would get this far. And I have to go in a minute. So
do you want to just
without
finish
me?
this next time?
But this feels like because can we finish this tomorrow?
Yeah, that's fine.
No one else had a nomination for the tomorrow's reading group, so
okay, I might mention something there too, but like I think we can sort of do our, I don't know, like saying, but go do the postmortem on this paper tomorrow, like get our thoughts out about it. Like I think we kind of have positions staked out, like how relevant and what the language can tell us or not. But we can finish that tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
No worries. I don't know if you wanted to try to talk about anything else tomorrow, or just not, or let us know what. That's fine. I'm fine with stopping here today.
I don't know if we'll need the whole hour for the conclusions, so I don't have anything else I necessarily want to talk about, but I'm not opposed to it.
I'll try to think of something and look at this other stuff because there's sort of like overlap, but I'm not trying to merge these two groups all the time. So we'll see. Okay, we'll talk about it later, but we can wrap up for now.
Much anticipated conclusion to the paper we've been looking at for the last few weeks. Anything we want to say before we just dive into the end part of where this was? There we go.
I'm glad we read this paper. I think it's a good, it kind of feels like a cornerstone paper for the connection between cybernetics and cognitive science, the stuff we've been interested in, especially the bit about a description and observation. I feel like it helped me understand what second order cybernetics specifically would have to say about topics in cognitive science. So I think it was a good find. Very interesting writing style too. I've appreciated that.
Yeah, it's been. I agree with that. Any other comments? I mean, I'll say more too, but any other things when we talk about the paper? There's one thing I wanted to mention actually. Is this is more of a lab comment, but I have someone may basically be interested in helping us out with some onboarding related stuff. Maybe I was thinking especially because they're interested in training and development and in educational settings. And I thought, that might be really useful for Google Summer Code. And also we do a lot of work in that space too.
Yeah.
But more about that later. I'll mention that in Slack, but it was sort of a unique understanding, so we want to do certain things. I realized I'm thinking about how to do a bunch of onboarding stuff right now for this stuff and bringing out going through old materials and how do we do that and get people ready and okay, so that might be more about that later, I guess. Outside of that, I agree with what Amanda said. I know I haven't been able to read a lot of stuff in this era, so I know it's not as fascinating from certain perspectives or people who've kind of seen where this is. But it's been interesting on my part too, and the language, it's particularly the language is very it's dated, both the terms, but also the writing style is not how people do it. But it's also interesting to see even the separation of the points and the way it's done here, and the framing of the argument is interesting, and something at least to be able to reference later. But with that said, okay, sorry.
No, I was just going to say that it does have almost it's like building a structure. It's not quite mathematical in a kind of axioms and then propositions kind of structure, but it does seem to be sort of setting things up with definitions and then trying to build out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think I have a particular sympathy in that, like, we don't have to spend a lot of time on this, but like, just like yesterday in this whole discussion with the papers and the squabbling, like later Yogi was like, "Oh man, Levin stuff is trash. And like, here's 3 people that totally refute that." And it's like, that's not unusual, I guess. But like, it, as someone who's like, I don't know what I'm going to do with these aspirations, but I'm very, just to kind of reiterate my stance, like I'm very much not in favor of like, I want to build the one true theory about everything. Like I'm not in that camp pretty much at all. Like I'm pretty far away from that as they can be. But I do have a desire to like, not I don't think diplomat's the right word, but as someone who there one of the more interesting parts of this game for me has basically been, what do you do in a situation where there's stuff that hasn't been developed that you have to talk about, and how do you, like, I don't know if this is the greatest example of that ever, but it's an example that's interesting given the way of things that are trying to be talked about. And like I have on my book stacks behind me, I have the Wolfram's new kind of science book that I will one day get to. I have, I think it's one about like chaos as like a new like science, and some other things of that nature. And like I meant that the squabbling that I mentioned here was about like Levin's and Bongard's living things, machines, paper. And it's like these ways of talking about things. And I was like, oh, also Logan Thrasher Collins, our friend. I don't know if I mentioned this last time or not. He made a very a nice concise paper on like I think it was a merging of like the Gaia theory and cybernetics theory, and it's just like, here's a way to think about things in these 2 big, broad, sort of holistic concepts. And it's something like, yeah, like that's the kind of stuff I don't know if I want to like hang my hat on that, but I feel like there's something there that's appealing to me, and I don't see. I think I'm not saying this necessarily what Maturana is doing. I think a lot of Bradley's comments about like there's a very different approach to doing biology this way. Like this isn't a certain kind of biology. Maybe it's a different way of thinking about things conceptually, a different way of framing a lot of stuff. But it's been interesting to kind of see with the concerns that Maturana has, and obviously his lineage, it goes in a direction that we know about. But like what's up with that, I guess, and what are some ways to think about that ahead. So that's kind of been outside of like some of the suppositions, I guess, of his theory, which have limitations and insights, and that's been interesting. So
I liked I heard Levin talking this morning. I don't know if it was just a repackage of a previous thing or if it was something new, but he was basically talking about his TAME, was a technology of something mind everywhere. Yeah. And he was saying that it was very much driven by philosophy and a kind of, maybe like redefinition. Anyway, he felt that like redefining terms from a philosophical standpoint was the way he put it was something like is central to everything we do. In his
like,
lab. In his lab,
I want to like, I obviously want to do more with I keep referencing his research page, and I said I put this in the call for involvement. It's not really like a conference we can present at, but it's like an event to get your tickets to it. So I would love to.
You're talking about Ian McGilchrist now.
This one here. This is the event that I put in the call.
Yeah, for sure. I've heard him speak, and it seems like McGilchrist. I've got a friend who points me at him, and like his work seems very driven by what I would call neuropsychology. Like where damage, like a kind of neurologist's perspective of brain damage and the effects of it in terms of localization and things like that.
Yeah,
I'm thinking the right guy. Yeah.
And like
he's the hemispheres guy, right?
Yeah, that's McGilchrist.
Yeah.
There's like I guess it's a 3-day event where like Levin's speaking and Evan Thomas.
Levin's gonna be there too. Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, that's why I mentioned her. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So like it looks really like it'd be cool. Like I would love to see McGilchrist and Thompson and Levin and all these other people like in the same space would be great to do.
Yeah,
my kind of party. I won't be able to be there unless something amazing happens.
Wow. Yeah, it's a who's who of.
Yeah, Viveki I've listened to his lecture series.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Excuse me.
Interesting.
Anyway, I guess I'm just saying like I really, it's been interesting to me to see as someone who like has seen that's the renaming thing is this common thing across from like Frontier Map and all of like the original like sort of failed or like the ships that were never fully built, like early like survey of cognitive science, like I forget what I call some of the early stuff, but it's like the common theme seems to be around that space for me, and it's really cool to me that like Levin, who does a lot of stuff in other things, is also seeing that too, and there's obviously quite a bit of dispute about I don't think there's ever going to be a big consensus about let's name this and whatever, but I feel like there's also ways to approach that are important, even if difficult. Or I don't know, I don't even know what to think about it in some ways. Anyway, we can. I don't think there's anything else we wanted to talk about today besides finishing this paper. Is that right, Amanda?
Yeah, I think that's it. You had mentioned maybe a couple other things yesterday, but we didn't like read anything else.
Yeah, and like if we have a bunch of time, we can maybe like I don't know look at I guess there's like the world model stuff, but let's just put the nails in the coffin for this one. Sounds so gruesome. Anyway, I guess he was wrapping up this sort of problem section. I think we kind of got we got into the conclusion fully, and he was saying how he's I really love his like gumption. He's like, I did it. I told you what I was gonna do, and then I did it, even though you found out along the way what it meant. Homeostatic systems, right? Although the observer can decompose a living system into parts that he defines, the description of these parts does not and cannot represent a living system. So, I mean, like,
one question that we could sort of ask here, or like would be interesting to ask, is this foundational to like anti-representational views, like radical embodied cognition? Is this something that Maturana, we kind of know what Varela did, but like, did Maturana evolve? I'd be really curious to read like later Maturana, or like what was his views at the end of his career too, given what he saw Varela do or other people do. Because I don't know. The notion of component is necessary only for epistemological reasons. Yes, I'm familiar with
I
that.
like back where we were. The analysis of a unit into parts by the observer destroys the very relations that would be significant for their characterization as effective components of the unit. I liked that phrasing. That reminded me, and I guess more of this discussion about how description like can only ever be partial. It reminded me of Henry Bergson's philosophy. I haven't read a lot from him, but I've read his Introduction to Metaphysics, and he talks about, there are like two different ways of knowing. There's analysis, which is breaking things up, which is, I think, pretty much exactly what Maturana is getting at with description. It's like taking an entity and figuring out its parts. But then he says, like, in the process of doing that, you lose any potential for absolute knowledge of the thing, because analysis is fundamentally relative. Like when you break apart the concept and propose further concepts, it's all relative in this fundamental way. Not like it's all subjective, but like just the process of analysis involves relativization. Whereas to get absolute knowledge of the thing, you have to know it intuitively. You have to enter into the object. He uses very metaphorical language. You have to like participate in the object in a sense. And then he moves on to talking about how naturally we do that with ourselves. We have this intuitive knowledge of our personality. That's not the only kind of knowledge we have of our personality. Like we also self-analyze and can be lacking in this absolute knowledge of ourselves. So that bit in particular, because he even uses the word analysis, the analysis of a unit into parts.
And who was the other philosopher you mentioned? I'm sorry.
Henry Bergson, Henribergson.
Okay.
He's kind of like a analytic continental divide figure.
Feel free to like word better in there if you want. I'm just taking scrap notes here.
The on him is good.
What's up?
The Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy article on Bergson is pretty good.
Okay. And like it's really easy to see, because I don't think Maturana was super Buddhist himself. I think that was a Varelian thing that he got into, and it's really easy to see why. Like even like I remember like Zen cons about like dividing nature into reality and that like very particular ways of talking about that in count in a tradition. And I think that's part of the appeal probably for Varela. It's like, oh, this is a tradition that sort of has built-in training about how to do things that would kind of fit in eventually to like the gesture of awareness on becoming aware of stuff. Excuse me. Let me go back here. So components, self-referential circle, circular organization, yes. our cognitive process differs from the cognitive process of other organisms only in the kinds of interactions which we can enter, such as linguistic interactions, and not the nature of the cognitive process itself. In the strictly subject-dependent creative process, there we go. Process indicative, inductive inference is necessary functional model. Okay. Linguistic interactions orient the listener, yes, with his cognitive domain, but do not specify the course of ensuing conduct. Through the language, we understand the domain of descriptions, which we necessarily remain even though, etc., knowledge of it. A living system is not a goal-directed system, which is, so this, it is like the nervous system, a stable state determinant and deterministically closed off from the module. Yeah, okay. This is really interesting because part of I don't want to muck around in a big old can of worms. But part of the interesting thing that I'm not even going to show it. I'm just going to talk about it and say I'm talking about this poorly, so blame me, for that. But even in the I posted some like some screenshots from the people critiquing the Levin paper, and one of the individuals is very interested in like agency and goal-directed system, has done a lot of work on this, and is saying, oh, you're misquoting Varela and saying, it's this machine and that, not that machine. And it's interesting because like I'm not really sure what to make of sort of goal-directed system or agency talk, even though I think agencies are really important. I feel like I would like to one day get to a space where I'm talking about agency in a way that I feel really good about, because I have my intuitions and my druthers and my preferences about it, but like I don't really know how much agency sauce to mix into cognition or like the whole whatever we want to call consciousness, or even like Maturana talked. I think you're just going to get here to like self-consciousness again. I actually sort of enjoyed how he talked about self-consciousness, at least in terms of like it didn't feel like it felt like it was like I don't know, a little different from other means of talking about it, or the C word in general. But anyway, I feel like I don't really know how to feel about statements like is or is not a goal-directed system. I don't know if people have comments about that.
That kind of puzzled me. Because it seems like when the system is out of whack, when it's out of homeostasis, then it would have the goal to like return to that point. But I guess that's not what he means by goal. I meant to go back and see if there is clarity elsewhere on what goal means for him.
Does he mention goal? Like, I can't remember, but does he mention goal in like a different context, or is this?
Well, mentions it twice, the word goal, for what it's worth.
Well, okay, the goal, or at the goal state, in the language of the observer.
Right. Again, there's emphasis on the observer, like how things change with the observer.
Right.
Seems important because he's saying like this. The system itself is deterministic.
Well, now wait. It says the goal state that controls the development of an organism is, so that almost implies that, or he's saying that that's the language of the observer, but there's something in the organism that controls it. It's an autonomous process, maybe, except for mutations determined by the genome of the parent organism. So basically, there's the person, the observer is using the term goal, which is sort of implying some sort of mechanism or some sort of thing, and then there's an autonomous process which we don't, we call goal. We could call it anything, I guess, and that's what he's referring to. So I mean, he makes the distinction there. Maybe not enough because it's like I could say, yeah, but
He said by the end, all the definitions would be clear.
Well, no, but yeah, I mean, yeah.
I think we're just getting to this like concluding part. Is this part?
Oh, that is part of.
We're just about to get there, ironically.
Okay,
So
well,
I apologize for that. Or maybe I just straight up missed it. But he talks about this. Oh no! It's just the one that we were about to He was just about to tell us that we look back in the paper to what I looked at before. Thanks. No. Yeah, like it. I think another way of what I was trying to say earlier is like, I'm curious how this paper does or does not do some of the work that kind of helped out more radical takes and things. Because like, okay, we're offloading, not in a pun way, but like we're offloading this to the observer and to the cognitive domain and saying this cognitive domain, like what do you say, like all of cognitive science, or like the cognitive science as it should be would be a cognitive science of like observer specific points of view that is not the same at all as whatever he says is not the cognitive domain. Like that's yeah.
So I also have a question. Does he define cognition? I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm just genuinely, it's like you say cognition is not, we can, like, there's this part here, he's talking about cognitive processes, but then there are only some cognitive processes humans can enter, like linguistic ones, but there are others that are, we can't apparently enter. So it's kind of like, well, that means that there's cognition that obviously doesn't square away with the traditional sort of cognitive psychology definition.
Right.
Maybe even like animal cognition. I mean, I don't know.
So there's the type of cognition that we do involves pure relations.
Oh.
Just maybe not the most clear, but right, there's also other cognition. It seems like he thinks that just biological organization is cognitive.
Is it information processing? I wonder. Well, I mean, that's what some people call it that, but it's, that's.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's very Levin, right? I mean, Levin's like, there's multi-scale cognitive light cones,
Yeah.
Like a party. Yeah, the pure relations stuff is kind of interesting. Oops, I didn't quite do what I wanted to do there. He talks about, he specifically uses pure relations somewhere, doesn't he? Like, yeah. I remember the word pure.
Yeah.
Then I also remember niche being, what was it, the set of all your interactions?
Yeah, it's almost like Maturana here, maybe in a way that like, it's really tough because I have no idea of like the in-between. I can think of like kind of Chamorro style radical embodied stuff, and I can't, I'm really at a loss at the in-between states, and I probably should know more, but like I see where like there's very, very strong situating work of, okay, this is the cognitive domain, this is not, this is the pure relations, kind of like pure imagination land, which is not the right way to do it, but here's like what in this particular domain, I forget which one he called it, like this is the deterministic closed system, like stabilization seeking, not the predictor deterministic, the deterministic space. And I guess I didn't want to use the word prediction here, I guess.
But, in the Slack, Amanda brought up like the Robert Rosen book,
Yes.
relational biology, or I can't remember what book that was, but
Something?
yeah,
Anticipatory systems.
Anticipatory
Yeah.
systems. It's the same thing, but yeah, that's another good book. All that's old dense for well, this is dense. So yeah, it's a good yeah, it was a good good thing to bring up.
Yeah,
I
I
think
guess
the
my question is I
Yes.
have not read that book, but if it is dense and like similar in its goals, like talking about this same kind of like using the same vocabulary, I wonder where like the points of contact are and where there are like differences in these two ways of talking about things. Because my impression is that the style and the like much about the discussion is similar to this.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious about this substantial differences and similarities.
Yeah, it's the same time period to be sure. Like that's when they're both kind of thinking about what this stuff. So I don't know if they had direct contact or not, but where they like corresponded or anything like that. But
The only book on anticipatory systems
yeah,
written by
you could name something, and then be the only book on it. So
that's kind of funny. Okay. Okay. I guess we'll keep rolling. So that was our goal directed tangent. Oh, it's tempting to talk about the nervous system as one would talk about the stable, talk about a stable system with input. This I reject because it misses entirely the point by introducing the distortion of our participation as observers into the explanation of the system, whose organizing must be understood as entirely self-referencing. I don't know. I don't know if we have any hot takes on that. But, very careful situating what is. I at least appreciate like there's a line being drawn about what is the observer stuff, even if it's imperfect. Allo referring. When we adopt a stricter approach to analysis of the living organism, we cannot but subordinate our understanding of it to notions valid if only for man-made allo-referring. I'm not quite getting like this. Is that allostatic referencing or just I don't know. Purposeful design. Okay. Okay. I don't know. The cognitive domain of the observer is bounded but unlimited. He can in an endless recursive manner interact with representations of his interactions and generate through himself relations between otherwise independent domains. I really wonder like where the square is between a lot of this relational talk and like what would come to be affordances and things like that, because I don't know what to say. Relations are novelties, so I assume like ad hoc and novelties or emergent to that specific thing. Thus, he both creates, invents relations, and generates, specifies the role domain of interactions. He lives through but continues expanding a common domain. Okay. The new, then, is necessarily a result of historical organization that the observer makes of every attained state. Okay. So there's a lot of attempting to sort of demarcate, and it does make me think of it in those ways, like what is recursive, what is sort of downward operating, and then what sort of what is sort of deterministic at what point does that begin? Okay. The logic of description and hence behavior is in general necessarily the logic of describing system. Given behavior as referential deterministic sequences of states of nervous activity, no contradiction can possibly arise in it as long as the latter remains unchanged by intercurrent interactions. Okay. Okay. If interesting, accordingly, thinking and discourse as models of behavior are necessarily logically consistent in their generation, and that which the observer calls rational in them because they appear as concatenations of non-contradictory sequence-dependent descriptions. It is an expression of the necessary logical consistency. It follows that inconsistencies or rationalities in thinking and discourse as they appear to the observer arise from contextual changes and the circumstances that generate them while the independent frame of reference provided remains unchanged.
So even logic is just in the realm of description.
Like there's something in terms of like, I don't know if I want to say clinical assessment, but like interesting here in terms of even the general concept of diagnosis. Like I think a bit about like the DSM project and all that stuff in that space, which is very different. But like there's sort of interesting. I don't really know what to say about that yet, but very, very particular couching. Due to nature of these cognitive processes and linguistic interactions, we cannot say anything about that which is independent of us and with which we cannot interact. And he talks at length about that. I think, yeah, there's a large postscriptum as well. The genetic and nervous systems to code information about the environment and to represent it in their functional organization. But this is untenable. The genetic and nervous systems code processes that specify series of transformations from initial states, which can be decoded only through their actual implementation, not descriptions that the observer makes of an environment, which lies exclusively in his cognitive domain. And he goes on to illustrate that problem. I don't know if you want to.
I like the house building metaphor.
Okay. Do you want to talk about that or walk through it, or would it be?
Sure. So the difference, so you have like two teams of people that are tasked with building a house with the two houses with the same design. One way of giving instructions is to assign a leader who has, you know, the final blueprint and can delegate, and that you know what the final thing is supposed to look like. And another way of making this happen is for each individual worker, kind of like the cells in a cellular automata is what came to my mind. Each individual has a set of rules to follow in reaction to their environment. And you can conceive of that second set of workers, although the instruction manuals look very different, they still end up with the house. They don't know what it's going to look like from the beginning, but it turns into what we would, as the describers, as the observers, describe as a house. But at no point in their instruction manuals was the house, unlike in the first case where the leader knew what the house was going to look like. In the second case, they still build the house, but it's very different, a very different process. And so he seems to be saying that we function much more like the second group. Like the descriptions aren't what guide the behavior, aren't what guide the creation of the thing. So it's like a particular form of anti-representationalism. It's not like the representation. It's not like genes represent something. They, to the extent that they have instruction manuals, it's these very like individual level. Like how does this unit react to its surrounding units? That was my best stab at it. Maybe I could very well be missing something.
No, that sounds good. That sounds good. It's kind of like social insects that build a nest. You know, do they build it from a blueprint or a top-down mechanism, or they build it from emergent mechanisms? And famously, people have observed it's emergent in the way that, you know, I mean, you can read about that. Then there's always been this debate about like our genome having like a blueprint for development, say. And of course, then, you know, the counter argument is that genes are expressed in a highly sort of conditional manner, that it depends on the environment, but also, you know, you get gene expression in like building a complex tissue or complex organism that has some variation across organisms. So you'll see like, you know, small differences, not necessarily large differences, but, you know, people might say, well, you know, that comes from a blueprint and some noise. Other people say, well, this is an emergent process, and it's really just kind of the product of, you know, like almost like what we might see with a social insect construction. So yeah, there's been this. He didn't mention that. I don't know if that was after this point where that debate really became like kind of maybe it was, but still, well, no, it was probably about the same time. And he didn't really talk about that though.
Right. Yeah, I think this is kind of a nice reference point for yeah. Let's just keep different domains of interactions. I think it'd be nice to demarcate. Like if I was going to spend a lot of time on this, and Maturana saw really getting deep into his domain separation would be something I would want to do. They cannot explain each other because it's not possible to generate the phenomena of one domain with the elements of another. One remains in the same domain. Okay. One domain may generate the elements of another domain, but not its phenomenology, which in each domain is specified by the interactions of its elements, and the elements of a domain become defined only through the domain they generate. Through these concomitant interactions in different domains, or with several descriptions in the description domain, the observer generates relations between different domains as states of neuronal activity that lead them to definite modes of conduct, descriptions that represent these conjoined interactions as singular independent entities. Talks about relations of states of neural activity, yes, constitute elements of a new domain in which the observer interacts with it as a thinking system, but I do not reduce one phenomenological domain to another. It's the simultaneous logical isomorphism, that word again appears. I think it's the only time he's used isomorphism here at all, right? I haven't seen that before.
There might have been a couple others, but not really.
Of the new, I think he I think he meant it at least, new element relations with their source systems through enough mode of origin that gives the new domain generated descriptions explanatory capacity. Okay. Explanation is always a reproduction. Adequate understanding of this irreducibility is essential for the comprehension of the biological phenomena the consensual domains of living systems generate and their continuing evolutions. And then I guess this is I don't know what to call this, pre-postscriptum section. I don't know. Many conclusions about self-consciousness and knowledge which arise from this mode of analysis have been proposed in one way or another by scientists and philosophers from their intuitive understanding, but never to my knowledge with adequate biological and epistemological foundation. This I have done through distinction between what pertains to the domain of observer, the domain of the organism, and through carrying their ultimate consequence, the implications of circular self-referencing organizational systems, the implications of the functionally closed nature of the relativistic organization of the nervous system as a system under continuous transformation, determined by relations of neural activity of the system ever stepping outside of itself, and the implications of the non-informative orienting function of linguistic interactions. It's only after this has been done that the functional complexity of living and linguistically interacting systems can probably be grasped without it being concealed through such magic words as consciousness, symbolization, or information. Ooh. Most of the detailed work is yet to be done, of course, but the fundamental first step of defining the perspective from which to look has here been taken. As the final remark, one could say what appears to be another paradox, which points to the conceptual problem. Living systems in general and their nervous systems in particular are not made to handle a medium, are not made to handle a medium. Although it has been through the evolution of their handling of their medium that they have become what they are, such that we can say what we can say about them. Wow, that was hard to read.
Yeah.
Yeah, the content though I think is very like Fuchsian. Talking about the medium, and I kind of read that as meaning like there are things that will always be transparent to us in Fuchs's sense that we see through them, or like we use them to see, literally or figuratively see. Like we can't, kind of like the we can't feel our neurons line, but we're never going to be able to fully observe the thing that is the basis for our ability to observe. So yeah, despite the the writing style, I kind of found that to be a familiar idea.
I was like just challenging to literally express as I was writing it for the but no, I agree. I think there's something there. I think it's interesting to see also which of the magic words will become magic words and why. Like I kind of see, like I think in a lot of ways a potentially interesting way to categorize a lot of this sort of the vast and not smooth road that may be their cognitive sciences and their discontents and efforts and whatever misadventures is like, what are the things you're trying to cut out? Like, okay, let's not use the word conscious. Let's not use symbolism. Let's not use information. Even though, it's sort of like, a little bit, this is quite a bit of a stretch, but it's like, kind of like, you can only have two, but there's three options. Like it can be like sleep and a social life and good grades or whatever. Like choose
choose which of these things you don't want to talk about, and there's better or worse reasons for why. You could. I don't he didn't say intelligence here, but like given our recent paper on all the many differences of intelligence, you know, there are things that are just like that I think sometimes, okay, I really don't want to talk about representations right now, you know, or whatever. So that's always interesting. I don't know. I think there's a lot more we can say about this. So if you want to do that, go ahead. Otherwise, I'll just.
Well, I was going to make a point about something he mentioned towards the end. It says it's not possible for one domain to generate elements of another domain, and I assume he means like, you know, the analogy maybe of like a genome generating, like maybe doing. Well, there's this. Of course, we know that we can genetically engineer organisms. We can knock genes into organisms to make them do specific things. So there's been this recent paper where they've knocked in a tail expression or a non-tail expression into embryos. They've also done experiments where they've knocked like an opposable thumb into like an embryo of a monkey, I think. And like, you know, the idea is that you can knock in function to genomes, and we've demonstrated that. And this is after, of course, this paper from different domains. So I assume that like a monkey genome is distinct from a human genome in terms of its relations, although they're related. You know, and so you could conceivably, you know, with enough genes knocked in, you could do a lot of interesting things. And we do this in bacteria all the time as well. Where we boot the thing down to a minimal genome, and then we can add in the functions that we want to engineer into them. So I'm just curious, like, you know, if we think about genetic engineering as like a test of this statement, whether it's still consistent with this statement or whether it's an exception to this statement.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you know, the answer isn't obvious because, you know, it could be that like we can't really replicate. You know, there are, of course, it's not 100%. You don't just like Bing put a gene in and it always works. There's a lot of complexity there, but still.
Yes. Let's here. We finished this. We got his special paradox. And then the PS goes on by saying, no scientific work should be done without recognizing ethical implications. Oh, that's cool. In its present case, the following deserves special attention. Man is deterministic and relativistic, self-referring autonomous systems whose life acquires its particular dimension through self-consciousness, ethics, and morality arise as commentaries that he makes on his behavior through self-observation. He lives in a continuously changing domain of descriptions that he generates through recursive interaction with the domain, another constant element in historical transformation that maintain identity is an enactory system. That is, man changes and lives in changing frame of reference in a world continuously created by and transformed by him. Successful interactions directly or indirectly subservient to the maintenance of his living organization constitute his only final source of reference for valid behavior within the domain of descriptions and hence for truth, but living systems are self-referential systems and any final frame of reference is necessarily relative. Okay. Accordingly, no absolute system of values is possible, and all truth and falsehood in cultural domains are necessarily relative. Geez, don't talk to like the moral absolutists or even like virtue ethics and stuff like that. Well, I guess that's not necessarily the case, but I'll defer to the philosophers. So I guess he's saying, you know, there's no absolutes in that particular
realm. Language does not transmit information, and its functional role is the creation of a cooperative domain of interactions between speakers through through the development of a common frame of reference, although the speaker acts exclusively within the covered domain, where ultimate truth is contingent on personal experience. No one can ever be rationally convinced of a truth which he does not have already implicitly in his ultimate body of beliefs.
That was interesting. I don't know about that. It seems to mean that like our body of beliefs is like just so like rigid.
Well, I feel like that's what I would like have as one interpretation, and I wonder like if he really more so means like there is a realm of all possible beliefs that everybody has, but it's like the descriptions and these sort of specific, you know, ad hoc or emergent or relevant or contingent things that are like these like sequencers or parsers of those things. I wonder what he'd say about that part of it too, because otherwise, yeah, it feels there's a lot of language that's very you have no choice, no free will. Everything's determined based on what your system is.
But maybe, yeah, what he means here is at any given point, your set of beliefs is a subset of what's possible, but still like the ultimate body of beliefs is fixed by the stuff he's been talking about. So like as you modify your beliefs, you necessarily have to remain within the larger bubble. I don't know, but it feels like if you think about movement of your beliefs through a belief space, it seems like a transformative experience would be something that could cause like a jump, a discontinuity in the trajectory of your beliefs. But I guess that it would all have to still be within the set of what's possible.
I imagine he also has a specific meaning of rational that he talked about before that I don't quite grasp, and I'm not gonna.
Oh yeah.
Go into that too. If it was just convinced, then I think then it'd be a very different story. But I imagine there's a very specific meaning that rationally convinced, because he's saying language. I get his argument. I don't know. According to his own theory and worldview, I understand what he's trying to get at, or at least I think of it. But I don't know how much that stands out. Yeah. Man is a rational animal that constructs his rational systems as all rational systems are constructed, that is based on arbitrarily accepted truths, premises, being himself a relativistic, yes, okay. But if only a relative, arbitrarily chosen system of reference is possible, the unavoidable task of man is a self-conscious animal that can be an observer of its own cognitive processes is to explicitly choose a frame of reference for his system of values. This task has always avoided, this task he has always avoided, put the blame on you, man, by resorting to God as an absolute source of truth, or to self-delusion through reason, which can be used to justify anything by confusing the frames of reference and then arguing one domain with relations valid in another. The ultimate truth on which a man bases rational conduct is necessarily subordinated to his personal experience, personal truth, and appears as an act of choice expressing a preference that cannot be transferred rationally. Accordingly, the alternative to reason as a source for universal systems of values is aesthetic seduction in favor of a frame of reference specifically designed to comply with his desires and not his needs, and defining the functions to be satisfied by the world, cultural material in which he wants to live. Well,
So
we don't have
it's
to
all
comment on
vibes.
that. Yeah. Seduction, favor, of frame of reference. This is like really trippy in terms of all of like the a lot of like what like I don't know if it's more AI safety or more like long terms about the bit about like like programmatically generated everything and like your personal universe stuff and like just that's the way to go. Like the most moral thing might be that everybody has their own like personal universe along those lines or something. I think there's a lot that could be picked at here, but we don't have to do that. Oh, it's already top of the hour anyway, so that was an exciting conclusion. Any final thoughts before we let it be? Yeah. This was sort of a fun, interesting conclusion. I think there's some very important substance here, and also some things that are like, okay. Maybe we'll talk about that some other time. I'll defer to Min about what we do ahead. But thank you for. It was a very entertaining time and informative too. But that's all for me for now.
All right.
I'll
Yeah.
talk to you next time and follow up on some other things that are too.
Yep. See you in 2 weeks.
See you
All
then.
right. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Goodbye.